Today we're gonna work on the front end a little bit. We're gonna make the login with keycloak on the front end. Last time where we left off was we set up keycloak on the back end. We made it work, the login, and the application started. Now we're gonna do this on the front end. So to start, we're gonna docker compose up. Port is already allocated, okay. I think I have already some dockers open. I'm gonna go up on the UI and close it on my other screen. There we go. So you shouldn't have this error because you shouldn't already have dockers running. Now if I do again, docker compose up, there we go. Okay, now I went into the apps/backend folder, pnpm start dev, and then in the front end pnp dev, and now we can start. So we already have our first error, this one over here, and this is because well, I think it is because we're not using the browser router in here, and in our app we are using routes, but we weren't using the browser router. I think this is the problem. Yes, now it's fixed and we have our basic home page over here. Now let's implement login and basic UI. We don't want to bother ourselves with UI too much yet. We don't want it to be pretty, we just want it to work for now. Okay, we're gonna start by coming into our .n file and we're gonna define some variables. There we go. So this client ID should be the same client ID as over here in our backend.env. Be careful because this callback URL also needs to be the same as the one that you've declared here. And this endpoint here should use your realm that we've created before in keycloak. So you should use the same realm over here. And the backend URL is the URL to, well, our backend, obviously. Okay, now I went into the home page.tsx and I updated the code inside here. So we're defining our query params for the connection URL with the client ID, the redirect ID, response code, and scope. All of these can be found in the .n file. Then we define a function login that will redirect the user to a specific URL. That URL is constructed using the endpoint that we defined in the .env as well. And we append the params that we just defined over here. And then we define just a simple header with the home and a button that calls our function. Now if we click on this will redirect us, and now here we can log in. I don't remember if we created an account, so apparently not. So I want to check, and yes, we did create accounts. So if you want to know this, you can go to your local host and 8080, because that's what we defined in our Docker Compose, if you remember here, for keycloak. Then you go into the manage realm, you want to select the correct realm into users, and here you can see the users. And this made me remind that we did define a script, the init config script, that creates some basic users and with a default password. And the default password is azerty. So if we go back here and we try to connect as an admin with the password azerty, this works. There we go. And we've been redirected to the callback URL. Now we have to implement this because once we're on this page, we need to use the session state and well, all these query params in order to get our JWT tokens from the backend. So if you remember, in the backend, in the auth controller, we did create two routes, /exchange and /refresh. Right now we're going to use /exchange and we're going to give it this code over here, code equals and all of this. We're going to automate this and we're going to implement this page. So we're going to close all of this. We're going to go into the pages, and here we're going to create a login callback page.tsx. There we go. So here you go, the login page. We are gonna create a new authentication context for our app, and We're going to retrieve the code and the ISS, the session state from the current URL. And we're going to use exchange OIDC code for JWT, which we're going to define ourselves. And which actually will just make a request to our backend with these parameters and fetch us the tokens. We're also going to make a little component here. We're going to make components, and then home page.tsx. There you go, the home button, and also I'm going to rename this home button, not home page. I was wrong. There we go. And we're going to import this. There we go. Now we're going to create this. So we're going to create a new file over here, user auth provider.tsx. I'm going to paste a bunch of code, and I'm now going to explain. So first of all, this is from my Arch project, but we are going to name it casino. We're going to install these missing libraries. So that is not what I meant to do. I should not have closed that one. So here pnpm add jwt decode. So we're back up here. We are going to create both these hooks. These are going to be TanStack, so React query hooks. We are going to use Apollo for everything related to GraphQL, but since our login we implemented it using REST, we are going to use React query for these calls. So here we define navigate, the expires at. We initialize both our hooks, so for the refresh and for the in order to log in for the first time. We get our JWT in case there's already one from the local storage, and we decode it if there is one, and we also memorize this. The decoding is done using this function from jwt-decode. Then we create a function receive tokens that we will call once we receive the tokens. The reason why we define this function is because this code gets called twice in one use effect and also in here in this callback. So here we define another function that is basically a duplicate of this. But why do we create another function for this? It's because this one will be exported over here in the provider because we want the user to use this one. Why? Because on top of calling our hook that we're going to define, we also want to call our function receive tokens in order to update the local storage so that then our GraphQL request will use the local storage, the updated token in the local storage. So if this wasn't clear, then right after calling our hook, we want to make sure that we always update the local storage, and that's why we make a wrapper for this function. I'm gonna get rid of these debugs here. This is the logic for the refresh token. So basically, we set in here when we receive the tokens, we know at what time the token expires, and so we set that the expired tokens at that specific time minus 60 seconds, because we want to give ourselves a bit of a buffer in order to make the request, make sure that our token is now updated, be able to send multiple requests if there are errors or something. So we do it a minute early. So once we receive the tokens, we set this expires at, and then this logic triggers when the expires at changes. If there's an expires at set, then we get the time left until it expires, and we run a set timeout that will call the refresh token route using the local storage refresh token that we are saving once we get the tokens. So once again, if it's not clear, we start by logging in. When we log in, we get our JWT token, plus we also get a refresh token. This refresh token, we store it for later use. Now we set the expires at time, so we say, okay, this token will expire in 4 minutes, even though it does expire in 5 minutes. So this triggers this code, this piece of code, and we will set a timeout for in 4 minutes to call uh, this route, so the refresher route using this piece of code. and it will use a refresh token that we saved earlier in the local storage in order to get new tokens. Once we get those tokens, we call this function and it repeats. It does it all over again. So that's what all of this does. Now here in the value, well, this is not complicated, so I'm not gonna go over this. We check if we have a decoded token. If we do, we check if he's an admin by checking the user's roles, and otherwise we put it to false. The user ID is equal to it's stored inside the token and the email as well. If we don't have a token, then we set all of this to null. Okay, now that this is explained, we are going to make these two hooks. And for this, I'm going to copy over these hooks from here, up hooks. So we're also going to pm add axios, and this can be replaced by the type that we've created before. Now this is not found. Why? Same reason, because it has to be imported like this. We're going to fix this a bit later. Over here we're going to fix the imports as well. It is probably the same problem as earlier, like this and like this. So the imports, they have to use type. So here I think this is the same problem as well. If we do it like this, yeah. So here in the first parameter, this expects a t data. So this is the return type, which is the token result body. So what do we do in this function? We fetch with axios using our backend URL on the path /auth/exchange. Why? Because if we go into auth controller, our controller into /auth/exchange, and we want to run this piece of code. Remember, this is accessible publicly, so this means we do not need to be authenticated yet, which is logic because we are trying to get our JWT token. And we provide our code, our ISS, and our session state. Once this is done, we call the onSuccess that we might have provided, but maybe not, and I don't think in this case we do provide it. Actually, now that I think of it, this is useless. Yes, this is useless because we do spread this out. So this is only useful if you are gonna define some kind of logic here by resetting, yeah, by doing something like this. Since we don't do that, we can just remove this. For this one, it's quite similar, so we are just going to fix all these types here. I'm just gonna re-import them like this. There we go. So we make another call, axios call. It expects the token result body. We do it to /auth/refresh, and we provided the refresh token. I'm also going to remove this because it's useless. So this is interesting because when I remove the any from here and actually type it correctly using the token result body, then we get this error over here. Big error. So basically it's not happy because type void is not assignable to this type. Okay, but if I do put any, then there's no problem. That's just great. So I know this isn't good to do, but I'm just gonna leave this as any. And let's test this. I imported it also in the login callback. Okay, if I'm not mistaken, then now we are ready. So now we can pin pm dev once again. We can go back to, actually, if we just do it like this is not gonna work because it's gonna say that the code is probably outdated now. Let's just go back to the home page. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. That is not what I wanted to do. Let's just click here. There we go. Log in. And let's see what happened. So if we look at our network, what happened? Ah, yes, because we're just not using this route at all. In our application here, we have to say that we want to use this piece of code. So route path equals /callback, and we want to do the element equals the login callback. Yeah, that's it. That's it like this. Now we're using this piece of code. And what is happening now? Okay, because we didn't provide the context provider. Well, there we go. Here it is. So I will uncomment it and import it. This should be better now. If I refresh, no query client set. Okay, we have to configure stack over here. So here we are going to say export const stack query client equals new query client. There we go. And over here we are going to wrap our application with a query client provider, and the client equals stack query client, like this, and it's around this over here. This should be better now. Okay, once again, let's try again. Wait, did it work? Okay, it worked, but okay, so it's not happy about the cores. So let's figure this one out. Okay, so I think the problem is that we didn't configure cores at all in our backend. So right now I'm in the main file of the backend, and I'm gonna here do app.enable cores and the origin. So we want to allow specific origin, but we might want to allow multiple origins in the future. So we are going to define it like this. This can be a function, and so we only allow it if the allowed origin includes the origin that is being tested, if it's allowed or not. And we are going to define the course origin into our file over here up, and we are going to say exactly this. So the reason why we did it like this is because we can do, for example, like this, we can allow multiple applications if we want to. So I think this should fix it now. If I start over this, if I start this over, up. Okay, so let's try that again now. We go back to home and we log in. Okay, so the first one didn't work and the second one did. So am I logged in? So the second one did work, but the first one didn't. That's strange. I'm not sure why that happened. So the error is because invalid grant, the code is not valid, but it does work. So it's only the second time, which makes sense because the second time the code has already been used, so it should not work. Earlier was the first time though, so that's strange. And also we should just not be making this request twice. Why are we making it twice? But this isn't really a problem because it's still working, so I'm just gonna ignore it for now. If it becomes a problem, I'll fix it. So now we are logged in and we are going to go on our home page and we're going to just show some user information. Um, we're going to come here, we're going to get some information from our user authentication context. We're going to extract the email and the user ID and if he's admin, for example, and then we're gonna put some text over here just to show the email, the username, user ID, sorry, and if he's an admin or not. So there we go. I'm logged in. I am an admin because I logged in with the admin email earlier, and this is my user ID. So now login works on our front end, so that's fun. That's nice. In the coming episodes, we're gonna be able to continue working on some more exciting features than login, because login and registering isn't very useful. Well, not useful, not I just mean interesting. And yeah, so let's start building our casino.